Welcome, everybody, to the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast. My name is Nicole Greer, and they call me the Vibrant Coach. And I have an amazing guest all the way from down under. I bet you he gets introduced like that every time. His name is Oscar Trimboli. And look what he sent me all the way from Australia. I've got my little document here, How to Listen, Discover the Hidden Key to Better Communication. And guess what? He sent me 3 extra copies. And so here's what I know. If you'll make a comment down below and like this episode and then email me at Nicole at Vibrant Culture, I'll get this book to you. I'll put it in your inbox. That's what I'll do. So I want to share the love today because he shared it with me. We're going to pay it forward. Let me tell you a little bit about Oscar. Oscar is an award winning author and the host of an Apple award winning podcast, Deep Listening, and is a sought after keynote speaker. His third book, the one I just showed you, is How to Listen, Discover the Hidden Key to Better Communication, the most comprehensive book about listening in the workplace. And how many of you are thinking, my boss needs this book? See, it's going to be good for Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries. Along with the Deep Listening Ambassador community, he's on a quest, please don't miss this, on a quest to create 100 million deep listeners in the workplace. Oscar, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome.
G'day, Nicole. Looking forward to listening to your questions.
Well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a little trip through the book. So tell us first of all about the first two books. What are the first two books about? Because we're probably going to want to buy all three. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, it won't surprise you that they're all about listening. and the third book brings together research from, at that stage, 14,000 workplace listeners. We're up to 36,000 workplace listeners now. So that book brings together the art and the science, and more importantly, or what the people say in the reviews, is practical tips to improve listening at work.
And that's what we want. We want some practical tips. Yeah. And so on page 6, you have this quote, and it says, listening is a skill, a strategy, and a practice, a way to balance how you communicate. Will you tease that apart for us? How is listening a skill, a strategy, and a practice?
When we think about listening, most of us aren't formally taught how to listen. Yet we were taught to listen by our parents through role modeling, by our teachers at schools, maybe by musical teachers or theatre teachers or sporting teachers. We all discovered a way to listen that didn't have any add, subtract, divide, multiply to it. It didn't have any structure around it. So when we think about listening, the first thing you want to do is just build some listening muscles. That is the skill. That basic foundation, because what we know from the research we've put together, 2 in 3 people are struggling even to get their mindset into the conversation. So they're not even ready to listen. They're distracted, they're lost, they're thinking about other things before they get there. So getting that foundation in place is the skill that we talk about there. When we move towards it being a strategy, it's about how do you bring in the workplace an approach that isn't about listening all the time, but it's who am I not listening to? What are the stakeholder communities or the people in my team or the customer sets that I haven't listened to? What's missing? What are the barriers that we haven't thought about? Is the frequency of the way we ask for feedback relevant to the kind of change we're trying to drive in the culture of the organizations we're part of? And then finally, it's a mindset to go, how do you role model this kind of listening to other people? And how do we, as leaders who are trying to build cultures, role model that, not just to our staff and to our customers, but to our suppliers, to our regulators. There are many stakeholders when we think about the ecosystems that listening and communications impact.
So good. All right. You have this other great thing that you have on page 10. Like, we might not get through the whole book in an hour because I love it so
Wow, if we're
much.
going to four pages a
We went
question,
4 whole pages. But like it's so good. It says okay, everybody do this. Close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. Imagine operating in a world where there are shorter, more productive meetings, fewer mix-ups and misunderstandings, healthier relationships at work, higher employee trust. What? Reduced unnecessary rework, sustainable organizations, and this one, the last one, so important, opportunities to think, hear, and see your most complex challenges differently. You may open your eyes. I mean, like, we couldn't skip over that, right? Like, this is a game changer, listening.
for you, Nicole, do you see that in the workplaces you're working with? You know,
There's there's pockets of it.
no, not the positive, but I mean the reality of
No,
back
I
to
said
back
there's pockets.
meetings. What do those pockets have in common, do you think?
Good listeners. And the mindset and the skill maybe that you just
Mm.
talked about.
And is that about great listening from the employees or from the leaders or both? What sets them apart, do you think, that little pocket? Because I think where we see it rarely, we want to shine a light on it and kind of go, oh, wow, what can we learn from that?
Yeah. Well, I would say it's probably an enlightened leader, whether that leader's formal or informal.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody is, as you said earlier, demonstrating it, and people are having a wow experience because the listening is going on. And so they're like leaning in. You're like, wow, we're listening to each other. This is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, Oscar? Do
A
you see
lot of,
it?
yeah, I do, and pockets also. And I
Yeah.
think the biggest challenge we face with listening is this mindset that listening's hard, it's difficult, it's draining, because a lot of people think that listening is something that you do like a therapist on a Netflix show where someone's on a couch and you're wisely stroking your chin while they, expand out and explain all the issues they're trying to overcome. That's not the kind of listening I'm talking about. That's therapeutic listening. That's got a place. I'm not qualified for that. And I see a lot of leaders in the workplace trying to mirror that. And I also say, be careful. That's malpractice unless you're a certified psychiatrist.
Right.
And the reality is, I go back to 2008. I was in a board meeting at Microsoft. It
Hmm.
was a budget setting meeting between Sydney, Seattle, and Singapore. So there's 17 people on this intergalactic video conference to set the annual budget for the year. And you can imagine there's lots of positioning, posturing, politicking, all that sitting under the numbers, as you do in any kind of complex system like that. And then 20 minutes into the meeting, my SVP, my local CEO, Tracy, she's sitting across the table from me. She says, Oscar, we need to speak immediately after this meeting. Now, I don't know about you, Nicole, but when someone says, honey, we need to talk, I'm thinking all kinds of bad things.
That's right.
I did not listen. I did not listen for the rest of the meeting. Now, the meeting was scheduled for 90 minutes. And from minute 20 to minute 70, the meeting finished early. All I was trying to do was, with a pen and piece of paper, trying to figure out how many weeks of salary have I got in my bank account and who are the 5 people I need to call after this meeting.
Right. I got to get networking.
Yeah. Yeah. So the meeting finishes and everybody packs up their stuff and video machines shut down and all kinds of things like that. And I try and avoid my execution and I pack up my things and move my way to the door. And Tracy says, hey, Oscar, please close the door because what I have to say to you is really important. It's like, oh, okay. So I start walking back, and she says, as I get about halfway towards the boardroom table, she goes, "You have no idea what you did at the 20-minute mark, do you?" And I thought, I'm getting fired, and I don't even know why. And Tracy sat me down, looked me in the eye, and said, "If you could code how you listen, you could change the world." Now, for leaders out there, this is the really important bit. What I heard was, "Woohoo! I haven't been fired." I did not care what she was going on about listening. So as leaders, sometimes we say things, but what the other person hears is completely different because they're listening through their own set of filters. Now, the point of the story is at the 20-minute mark, I asked a question that reduced the length of the meeting by 20 minutes, which multiplied by 17 people is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't because I didn't pay attention, I got a huge increase in a growth number that I didn't really like, but I wasn't paying attention, so it was my own fault. And 2 weeks later, the chief financial officer, Brian, said to me, "Hey, Oscar, can you come and audit my listening in my next team meeting?" I said, "Oh, Brian, you've been talking to Tracy about this listening caper thing, right? I haven't got time. I didn't pay attention. I've got this uplift." And then Brian said those magic words that you want to hear if you carry a revenue target. "Oscar, we can't change the top line, but we may be able to invest for growth." I said, "Brian, what time is it and where do I need to be?" And then 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in a meeting with Brian with his 9 directs and writing down, like he's asking a lot of triple barrel questions. He's only engaging with about a third of the people. And all of a sudden I realize I'm coding how to listen. So let's make sure that we understand that great listening is focused not only on what's said, but what's not said. It's focused not only on what's said, but what is meant. And when we understand what people mean rather than merely what they say, we can get to the root cause quicker on systemic cultural challenges. We can get to make step changes that bring people along in the journey rather than resist, because the number one issue in cultural change isn't the ability of the leader to articulate the change. It's the inertia of people who don't believe they've been heard in the change journey. We have too much cheerleading and not enough funerals.
Mm. And that is the end of this episode. Mic drop. That's
See, yeah,
fantastic.
just proves everything can be shorter, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And
Why?
so,
Why is that a mic drop moment, Nicole?
because it's, I don't know, I believe you. I think it's what you just said is true.
Hmm.
Like there's the story that tells you you need to listen. But I guess we should ask you, how do we do that? Should we go into how? We should probably go into how, right? And I love the story. So don't miss that, everybody. Oscar went into this story that took 4 or 5 minutes or whatever it was, and you can illustrate a ton of things, ton of techniques, a ton of strategies, a ton of learning points in storytelling. When's your storytelling book coming out? That's next. Book number 4. You gotta get busy, Oscar. I don't know what you're doing with your life.
Well, it's funny. 2018, I'm talking to a colleague, Dan Gregory, and I was like, "Yeah, 100 million deep listeners were on this quest, blah, blah, blah." He goes, "Yeah, and how are you going to do that?" And he goes, "I hope you're not going to listen your way to 100 million deep listeners." And it's like, I'm scratching my head going, "Where's this going? Where's this going?" He goes, "Oscar, you're going to have to get really uncomfortable, and you are going to have to become an exceptional storyteller. You're going to have
Yeah.
to learn how stories make a difference, because stories are where meaning are created in the context of the culture in which people operate." Now, I need more than one story. It's just that story. We were talking
That's
about shorter meetings. That was a simple illustration of, a 70-minute meeting rather than a 90-minute meeting multiplied by 17 people.
who get
But
very large salaries.
Yeah, but Dan pointed out to me a blind spot for me in my communication style, and it's when we think about storytelling, we think about what I've just done.
Hmm.
It's the anecdote the person says one on one, or maybe in a group setting, or maybe from a stage or a broadcast or something like that. But what Dan said to me was really interesting, and again, he was role modeling exceptional listening on his part because he'd observed me in action. He says, "Oscar, you're a black belt one on one. You are a master, but that's not going to get you to 100 million. You need to be able to create artifacts, systems, questionnaires, all kinds of artifacts to help many people that you'll never meet and you'll never touch." He says you're going to need to write books. You're going to need to create assessment tools where people can figure out what kind of listening gets in their way. We've built jigsaw puzzle games. We've interviewed 120 of the world's most exceptional workplace listeners that.
How do you get on that list? How do you know that? That's amazing.
Well, often it's word of mouth where people will say to me, "Oh, you really need to speak to this justice judge or this air traffic controller or this hostage
Mm,
negotiator or this dolphin trainer." All right. So it's like a whole different way of thinking
cool.
about language or 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 people who are deaf and people who are blind and we've interviewed all those kinds of things because they will have a different perspective on listening. And more importantly, for our audience and your audience, which is really rich and diverse, the story I told about a boardroom meeting with an intergalactic video conference, not everyone's going to relate to that. A certain group of people in corporate world will, but will someone on a manufacturing floor in a pharmaceutical company relate to that? Maybe, maybe not. So we've got to find ways to do that. And I think as leaders who are trying to move cultures forward, the difference between hearing and listening is action. The
Hmm.
difference between what Dan said to me was I took it and did something with it.
That's
And
right.
Nicole's commented on it's like, oh, that story was helpful. And
Absolutely.
as leaders, do you spend your time hearing or do you spend your time listening? Do you take action? Do you communicate action? I can very quickly go into an organization and know their systemic approach to listening to employees because I only need to ask three questions.
Oh,
Number
what are
one,
they? Yeah.
do you ask your employees for feedback in a systemic way? That's a yes, no. Most people think it's a survey, but it doesn't necessarily need to be one. Number
Okay, don't
two,
go any further. Wait, what could it be besides the survey?
it could be a simple question during a meeting. So
Okay.
imagine we got a 1 hour meeting. Now, I don't recommend that because I'm all about shorter meetings, but just for maths, we'll just say 1 hour. 20 minutes before the end of a 1 hour meeting, imagine it's a team meeting, but it could be a one on one meeting. Go around the room. Given the time remaining, what's the best use of our remaining time?
Oh, that's good. Write that down,
Okay.
everybody.
And the reason we ask that is to shortcut the following, which is what most people say and hear crickets. Uh, I would value your feedback about how I'm going as a leader.
That was so Australian. I loved it.
That
Yeah.
you don't know managers who ask for feedback in your world like that.
No, no, the way you said it was just fantastic. No,
Yeah.
no.
So because there's always a power differential between a leader and other people. So some people may feel comfortable speaking up, most won't. If you say, given the time remaining, where should we focus? It's going to signal something to you. Hey, what's been useful so far and what needs to change?
Right.
Now, this helps the system become self regulating. This is really important. At the
Hmm.
beginning of those meetings, Ask this question to everybody in a meeting. So I'm going to visualize 6 people for this meeting because on average, a leader will probably have 6 people in a room, whether it's a project meeting or direct reports or something like that. Ask every person, in one sentence, what do you want to get out of today?
Excellent.
Now, you're not asking that question for you as a leader. Remember, this is about systemic listening. We're doing this. A good host gets everybody to listen to the active speaker. A great host gets everybody to listen to each other. The use of that question is a conversation compass that goes, oh, now that Nicole said that, when I get bored and drift away, maybe I can listen on her behalf. Maybe I can listen in a way that notices when she's included or excluded from the conversation, or prompt Nicole to speak up during the meeting. So these adjustment mechanisms are ways that you can listen in a systemic way where you're building this muscle up. Any questions about that before we move back to the employee engagement survey, which we started the conversation off with?
I know, but I had to know because you said it doesn't have to be an employee engagement survey. And only reason that like tripped my trigger, Oscar, is because everybody loves these employee engagement surveys, but I find they are disastrously executed and disastrously handled after the fact. So I'm not a huge advocate of an employee engagement survey unless you know what you're going to do with it, which I think like they send it out and they're like, oh, look what people said, and then nothing happens, or it's not addressed, not listened to, and therefore now it's like, well, don't send me another employee engagement survey because you didn't do anything about the stuff I wrote on the first one. Like that, I see that everywhere I go.
Or worse yet, in year 2, they bribe people with cupcakes and celebrations and email reminders. Fill in the
Gift
survey.
cards.
Fill in this gift cards. And around the world, let's go back to first principles and talk about cultures.
All
When I
right, let's.
interview anthropologists about these standardized questionnaires, they make 2 points that are very important. Number 1, anthropologists do not compare cultures. Each culture is unique and academically insane to think that you can compare cultures. Yet everybody buys a standard off-the-shelf questionnaire on the vague hope that they can get an industry comparison. How am I going compared to my industry, my organizational size, my geography, my whatever? It's like the anthropologists I've talked to go, that's total insanity. Some organizations are in growth phase and some organizations are in maintenance phase. They obviously have 2 different cultures in the same industry, yet you're comparing them. Some could be founder-led, some could be public companies, some could be owned by private equity, yet you're comparing them. Insanity. But that's not the worst bit. Here's the worst bit. Anthropologists say if the people who are being surveyed were not involved in the creation of the question, how do you know they even understand the question?
Oh, that's good too.
And there's always a hint that people don't understand the question. Your most consistent midpoint, on a scale of 1 to 5, they answer 3. What's the question? Gets 3 on everything from everybody. That's probably a question they don't understand. Are you involving your staff in the creation of the survey? Are you even aware that it's possible they couldn't even understand some of the questions you're asking them? What are you listening happens before, during, and after a conversation and an event. Where I see leaders fall down consistently is the before piece and the after piece. And Nicole's already beautifully articulated that the biggest issue with employee engagement surveys isn't the collection. because we collect it and then we segment it by department and tenure, and there's a whole bunch of things, and we generate these endless reports and no action plan. Or we have an action plan that we don't communicate to the staff. The final part of building powerful, sustainable cultures from employee engagement surveys from the people who do it well. And this is an exceptional piece of listening on their behalf. They will send out a communication plan to go, thank you for your responses. This is what we took out of it. This is what we're doing about it. So they'll have a 3-point action plan, and we'll communicate that to you on a consistent basis. Here's the bit that counts the most, though. Because they treat their staff as adults and not as children,
Don't miss that.
because they treat their staff as people who are as responsible for the cultural change that they're undertaking as the leaders, they say to them, these are 3 things we heard, and unfortunately, we can't resource that change until we get the first 3 done. So they're signaling back to the group what they can do and what they can't do. Signaling to the group that we're going to do everything you asked for is commercial insanity, is a fantasy. Please, the thing that separates good listening from great listening is being explicit about what you will do and what you won't do. And it's often that not communicating what you won't do is where we get tripped up, because people consistently say, yeah, I filled in the form, I did nothing with it. I filled in the form, and for the 3rd year in a row, it's still the top issue when we haven't made any progress on that. Why should I bother?
That's
By
right.
year 3, your survey responses move back towards the midpoint, and consistently more people are answering dead on the middle because you have got the worst thing possible. You've got employees who don't care.
Right. Apathy for the whole process, which means not on the path to help you, apathy, right? Oh, I couldn't
All
agree
right.
more. And the part
Well,
that you said, Oscar, about number 3, and we can't do anything about X because it's not changing. This is how it rolls, right? And I think that's so important because there are certain things, and it's like sometimes the employee survey is like this Pandora's box. You've opened up this whole issue and you're never going to resolve it. Like you all have to come back to work. Sorry, we're not letting you work remote anymore, or whatever the big hairy thing is. That's the hairiest one out there still is, can I work from home and blah blah. It's getting very old. It's out there. So go ahead. I'm listening.
well, well, enough about the doom and gloom. It's like, okay, so what are we going to
Yeah,
do
let's fix
about it,
it. Right. Let's
right?
fix it. Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier on, it's all going to come down to enlightened leaders who are going to go, what we're doing now isn't working, so let's think about how we do change.
Yeah.
Now, when we go back to the 36,000 listeners that were surveyed, and we collect all kinds of dimensions from them about what industry they're in, their tenure in the organization, their seniority, their age, their gender, whether they're neurodiverse or not, what their geographic location is. But we ask them one question that's the only question where you get to write a freeform answer, and then there's 20 questions you've got to fill in on a scale of 1 to 5. The one question we ask them is, what do you struggle with when it comes to listening at work? And for most people, they don't struggle with the person they're trying to listen to or the group they're trying to listen to. They aren't even at the fancy pants active listening stage. Most people aren't listening to themselves. They turn up in a conversation with so many browser tabs open in their head that their memory is overflowing. They're thinking about the last conversation, the next conversation, what they got to have for lunch. What do I need to put the trash out tonight? Have I got to pick up my kids from from school, what's going on the weekend. Oh my goodness, I forgot to pay that bill, right? It's just not
That's right.
present. They're
That's
just
right.
not available to listen. So for most people, they live in this false assumption that listening commences by focusing on the person speaking. That's missing a huge step. Step number one, you need to be ready to listen. So for many of us, again, we're in back-to-back meetings. Or for the meetings we have control on, a very simple thing you can do, don't start your meeting at the top of the hour. Why? Because the person coming from the last meeting is going to finish their meeting at the top of the hour. So when I work with my clients, they know every meeting starts at 10 after the hour. And what they say to me is, oh, so look forward to your meetings, Oscar. I can go to the bathroom. I can grab a cup of tea or coffee. I can get something to eat. I can collect my thoughts before I come into the conversation. And at 10 after the hour, they're ready to have the conversation. Yet, if you're in back-to-back meetings, this is what happens. Half the people turn up on time, the rest straggle in. The last one comes in at about 5 after the hour. Sorry, Nicole, just finishing up with the last meeting, but I'm here now and I'm ready. No, they're not. They are not even close to being ready. As opposed to if you start at 10 after the hour and they're ready at 5 after the hour, well, you've got a fighting chance that we're actually going to start the conversation off well. But most people won't have the courage to do that. Now, you can't go to your boss and say, start your meetings 10 after the hour or 5 after the hour. But if you start a meeting, you can control that. Start it at 5 after the hour or 10 after the hour. And that's just creating enough space to get everybody ready. You'll be surprised how those meetings have a completely different energy and finish sooner because everybody's ready to have the conversation when they get in the virtual room or the physical room. Have you ever
Yeah.
experimented with starting off the hour, Nicole?
No, but I have a mentor. Her name is Anne Starrett, and she's been
Mm-hmm.
my mentor a very long time. She's like mid 70s, 80 pounds, soaking wet, forced to be reckoned with woman. She's amazing.
Mm.
And she brings people into a meeting, and I've been hundreds of meetings with her, and she actually practices centering before we all get started. She's like, just everybody straighten your back, put your feet flat on the floor, take a deep breath, and then she says this great thing, which I think you'll appreciate, Oscar. She says, let's be here now and somewhere else later. That's her famous line. And it just kind of just tells everybody whatever you just left or what's going to ahead of you, let's focus right here. So she just kind of calls you to attention in such a beautiful way. What do you think about her technique?
Well, I'm curious for you, how is that different from other meetings? Once that's happened, what's different in the meeting for you
Oh,
and for others?
well, everybody's heart rate goes down. They're not as panicked as when they first walked in. And it's kind of the opposite of what you described. People come rushing in at the last minute. Everybody's apologizing and there's all this frenetic, it's an energy thing to me. It's just that it's a calmer, better thing, you know? So I love the way she starts out a meeting. So it's
And
good.
for you personally, what does it do for you in how you show up in those meetings?
Oh, well, it gives me peace is what it gives me that we're going to be focused, we're going to get work done, we're going to do the right thing. It just sets the appropriate tone. And that's what leaders are supposed to do: set the tone, set the example. Lead by example. We've heard that one 100,000 times, and she does that. And you know in terms of I have this question I ask leaders when I coach them, Oscar. It's a really important question. What is it like to experience you?
Mm.
That's my question I ask leaders. And with Anne, like, she's in control, but she's not controlling, because she's like, I'm bringing this meeting to order per se, but does it in such a gentle, kind, respectful, and it's really about caring about us. Like, I want you to just relax.
Mm.
It's going to be fine. So it's
Yeah.
a bit of caretaking.
Yeah, because she's controlling the container, not controlling the conversation.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And for a lot of leaders, their stadium moments are team meetings. That's where cultures are built, and they're built in one-on-ones. But team meetings is where you're going to build the cultures the most. And how deliberate are you about building a container where a conversation can take place, rather than being controlling about the content of the conversation? If you control the container, you can curate the culture within it. If you're trying to control the content of the conversation, you're in a hurt locker of pain, because
yeah. Good
that's
luck.
deeply, deeply, deeply draining, energy sapping, not just for you, but also for the team, and very difficult to sustain and scale beyond that. Hat tip
Yeah.
to Anne, and thanks for highlighting what she does well. Have you stolen one technique from her in any other meetings?
Well, yeah, lots of techniques from Ann Sturrett. Yeah, she's big about having people talk two to two, turn to the person next to you and talk about it for a minute.
Mm,
Get your thinking out of your head, out of your head, out of your mouth to the person next to you. Yeah, she's very powerful gal. Yeah, she is a spiritual director and she owns a retreat house in Statesville, North Carolina. And her main client are pastors,
mm,
and pastors are paid to talk. And she brings them into a couple of programs. One is called School of the Spirit. I helped her with it for like 14 years. And in that program, you would have, five pastors, all from, it's really, really beautiful, ecumenical, Lutheran, Baptist, Methodist, all the flavors would be in that group, but it wasn't about, what they're trying to put out into the world. It wasn't about following Christ. It was about listening to each other and helping each other get, focused on what they wanted to do in terms of being a leader, right?
mm.
And so we would practice this thing called, she calls it holy listening. And so one person speaks and they speak for however much time we have, like 7 to 8 minutes. And then there's silence, and you think of a spirited question you're going to ask. It's open ended. It's full of curiosity and wonder. I wonder why he said this. I wonder why he's worried about that. And then that person receives the questions in a very gentle, amazing way, right? Like, so we model it for them. And then the focus person responds. So it's based on like the Quaker, you may know, the Quaker meeting ritual of, oh, it's not, do you know what I'm talking about?
Unfortunately, not.
Okay, it'll come to me in a minute. But anyways, the Shakers have this thing where the person is the focus and they get asked a question, and then at the end there's silence, and then you go to the next person and they share what's going on in their ministry, and everybody in the room is silent. There's no interrupting, there's no crosstalk, just listening. And then question period comes, silence again, and it repeats for the whole group. And very, very powerful listening. And there's a rhythm to it, there's timing. And I one time I worked with a guy named Dave Cowan, and he's a master certified coach guy, and he had this thing called the magic of dialogue, and it almost was the same thing. I think Parker Palmer, I don't know if you know his book Let Your Life Speak, but I think he's the one that came up with the holy listening thing. But it was very similar to what Dave Cowan did, but it was this thing of actually presenting the issue in the middle. Everybody gets a chance to talk. Nobody cross talks. There's questions, and then there's dialogue. So I've participated in both of those things. Listening is huge. Solves a lot of problems.
Well, given our time remaining, where would you like to focus? You may have
But
heard
okay,
that before today.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm still on page 10, but I wanted you to talk about the five levels of listening. I thought that that was really important. And on page 11, you have kind of this diagram that says yourself, the content, the context, the unsaid, and then the meaning. I was like, wow, these are so good if you could understand these things. So the 5 levels of listening, the first one is yourself, get ready to listen. You talked about that. Give and pay attention. Do you want
Mm.
to say more about that, the give and pay attention part?
Yeah, well, the first thing about the 5 levels is they're foundational and progressive. It's very difficult to sustain level 2 if you haven't done the work for level 1.
Yeah.
So when we get to level 5 in our database, we see 0.5% of people are thinking about how do I listen for their meaning rather
Mm-hmm.
than listening for what it means for me, right? That's the
Right.
big distinction at level 5, because what separates good listeners from great listeners, a good listener listens to what somebody says and tries to comprehend and make sense of it for them. Great listeners help the speaker understand what it means for them. Once they
Mm-hmm.
understand what it means for them, in the example you talked about going around the room,
Yeah.
that layered approach where you keep going around and around and around, and eventually you get to understand as the speaker, what does it truly mean for me? Not just today, but for the next decade and for my life and my legacy.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that's what the process is about. So I think when we think about the 5 levels of listening, the first thing to keep in mind is 2/3 of people in our database are at level 1. So
Wow.
that for the vast majority of people, this is where the work is
Mm-hmm.
getting your state ready. That's why I love the ritual that you explained about and creating a container where people can become present to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
As a leader, if you invested 5 minutes in a 50-minute meeting to do that, you would have completely different meetings. Now, there was
Yep.
many different protocols in what Anne explained, and the no crosstalk is a interesting one. And
Mm-hmm.
in some national cultures, that won't work. And it's how do you work within an organizational culture and a national culture as well. So there's some dynamics to
Sure,
think
sure.
about there. So let's think about that's level 1. It's working on yourself, and 3 simple things. Manage your time so you start off the hour. Number 2, drink water so you send a signal to your parasympathetic nervous system, the part of your body around your heart and your lungs. The signal, slow down, everything's okay, right? And if you really want to reset, and if it's possible, because it's not possible for everybody, but just listen to 30 minutes or 30 seconds of music before you get into a conversation.
Mm.
Whether that's fast music, slow, it doesn't matter. The music will reset and close down all those browser tabs to get you present to what's going on. And in the book, we talk about 3 different tempos of music and how that creates different energy and the kind of energy you need to bring to the conversation. Uh, at level 2, content. It's what we hear, it's what we see, and it's what we sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sense is about emotion. Can you see it's very difficult to process someone else's emotion if you haven't processed your own emotion at level 1?
Right.
If you're dealing with a bunch of emotions yourself at level 1 and you come into the meeting and you go, oh, that person's really frustrated. Well, they're actually not. You're the one that's frustrated. You're just projecting on them. So it's very difficult for you to hear, see, and sense at that level. So again, we get to 30% of people. So remember, we got 66 and change coming in at level 1. We've got about 30% coming in at level 2. That
Mm.
all they're about is just processing. What they say most common here is, I really struggle to not interrupt, or I consistently interrupt, or they talk too slow, which is another code for I want to interrupt. So, and some other signals that people send here is I really struggle with body language. Like I hate video conferences because it's difficult to read body language. So these are the kinds of phrases people are using here.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is a level 2. A level 3 context is how they say it. So a lot of people will say something about accents, for example, or the complexity of jargon at this level, or highly technical, or I don't like details, or I hate storytellers. This is all about the how of communication. Listening to context is really crucial. The most important thing to listen at context is backstory. An example might be somebody comes in, I've got a big issue, Nicole, with this project, and it's driving me nuts, and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, people want to either ask a whole bunch of questions, try and interrogate you, or get their question machine gun out and start mowing you down with all kinds of questions that they've probably already thought about. And they come into the conversation. Nicole, I'm really struggling with this project. And what would be the first question you would ask there, Nicole?
What's the struggle?
Okay.
Why is it a struggle?
Okay. So Nicole's got her question machine gun ready to go.
That's right. I'm gonna use that. Can I steal that from you shamelessly?
No, it's not mine.
Question machine gun. That is so good, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and then people inhale and you reload. You put more bullets in that gun, right?
That's exactly right.
And people confuse questions and listening. They're definitely not the same thing, and we talk about it in the book. If you're asking questions of more than 8 words, it's probably an unproductive question.
Well, it's probably it's probably got a little, like, I'm telling you the answer as I'm asking you the question.
Yeah, just because it's got a question mark at the end doesn't make it a question.
That's right.
Here's the question to understand context instantly. When somebody says, I've got an X with X, I've got a problem with a project, I've got a problem with a coworker, I've got a problem with a customer, I really need your help. How long have you been thinking about this?
Oh, I love it.
Now, it's a content independent question. It's operating at a context to understand not how long they've been thinking about it, but to get them to think about how long they've been thinking about it, right? Yeah. So if I say, well, it's come up today, I've been thinking about it for a month, I've been thinking about it for 2 years, is a very, very different context.
That's right.
Because that then gives you permission to say, can we start at the beginning? Now, what will happen is sometimes people will start from the beginning of the issue when they realized it was an issue, not necessarily when the issue started, right? So that gives you a chance to do that. So at context, the thing you want to understand is the backstory. Once you understand the backstory, a whole bunch of things open up for them.
Yeah.
And as a leader building a culture, you're going to have a very different conversation with somebody who says, oh, I've been thinking about it for 5 minutes, versus somebody who's been thinking about it deeply for 2.5 years. With your question machine gun, if you don't ask that question, you're going to misfire, you're going to miss the target, you're going to waste a lot of energy.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, I said, and murder the guy who's who's got the problem.
Yeah. Now, level 4, we listen for what's not said. And let me bring you into the neuroscience of speaking, because this is crucial. Hat tip again to Dan earlier on, who told me I need to get better at speaking. And what things I discovered is, although I speak slightly slower than this, like 100 to 125 words a minute, on average, most people speak 125 to 150. Unless you're an auctioneer or horse race caller, you're speaking at 200 words per minute, and you can hear everything I'm saying and still understand it at 200 words per minute, right? Mm. Can you do that for extended lengths of time? You betcha. That's why YouTube's got a 2 times speed, Audible 2 times speed, podcast players 2 times speed, and maybe even your compliance training in the organizations you're part of allows you to speed up the compliance training videos while you're trying to complete the annual compliance surveys. As a speaker, although I can speak at 125 to 150 words a minute on average, I can think at 900 words per minute. If I can think at 900 words per minute, that means the first thing that comes out of my mouth is 14% of what I'm thinking. Let me say it another way. If you ask a question about the first thing they say, you're missing 86% of what they already thought about it. 4 out of 5 things they're thinking about you haven't even heard. That's why it's critical to listen to what's not said. And you gave away a huge tip earlier on when you were talking about how AM works.
Mm-hmm.
Silent and listen have the same letters. The most powerful way, the most magnetic way to get people to say what they haven't said is to just pause. In the West, English-speaking countries especially, we have a negative relationship with silence. We call it the awkward silence, the pregnant pause, the deafening silence. Yet in
Sounds terrible.
high context cultures, Inuit of North America are a great example of this. The Japanese in North Asia, the Polynesian cultures, the Australian Indigenous cultures, tribal cultures in Africa and South America. Silence is a sign of wisdom, respect, and authority, and most gatherings commence not with the announcement of this is the agenda, but they commence by bringing everybody to presence with silence. And when you become comfortable with silence, you'll be stunned what other people tell you. If you've got safety issues, if you've got quality issues, if you've got cost overrun issues, that is because you're not taking the time to listen to what's not said. Because people don't feel safe enough to speak up because you're not clever and capable when it comes to the use of space and silence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying use that extended period of silence that I just offered. All I'm saying is if you're uncomfortable with silence, flex your muscles to use silence for 1 second longer than you're comfortable with. And once you've mastered that, move it out 1 more second and you'll be surprised. Because if you go from waiting, if you normally wait half a second and all of a sudden you're waiting for 10 seconds, people will just come across as like, whoa, is Oscar not taking his medication today? What's
Yeah,
going
was
on there? It's
weird.
a bit weird. So make the change gradual, but make it also perceptible to the other person. They will fill that silence. I guarantee you. Do you have the courage to use it?
Yeah.
Now, finally, sorry, Nicole, sounds like you had a question about unsaid.
No, I just wanted to share just quickly. I'm curious what you think. I work with a lot of leaders. Some of them have a personality that's outgoing. They have a strong opinion. They care deeply. They're passionate. They're quick. They're fast. They talk a lot. I love those people. But then I also have people that I coach that are quiet, typically good listeners, more reserved, more cautious. And, when these two pair up, it can be disastrous if they don't love and respect each other, right? And so oftentimes I'll tell my more quiet, cautious listener thinking types, well, he was asking me questions so fast and I didn't know what to say. And I will tell them, well, just say, hold on a second. I want to think about that. So let me just think a minute. And so I just say, slow the person down so that you can think, because that person that's kind of using their machine gun, maybe in this case, is not allowing the other personality type to have a moment to do what they need to do to participate fully. So, what do you think about me telling my cautious non-risk taker people to ask for silence for a minute? What do you think about that? Is that
As
crazy?
much, yeah, and let's look. Communication is a simultaneous equation. We
Yeah.
move from speaker to listener in microseconds in the dialogue, and the
Hmm.
positions shift and change. Some people think by verbally processing. So that
Right.
person who's asking lots of questions, they're just throwing it out there because that's the way they make sense of their world. It doesn't make that bad or poor.
No.
But it's back to the container. How do
Yeah.
we help those two people acknowledge the difference in their communication styles so this simultaneous equation can balance?
Yeah.
Rather than saying, hey, quite introvert person, tell them to give you time to think. It's like there's a simple conversation that both of them can have. Like in the past, you ask a lot of questions. I sent you a verbal processor. I need time to think. So as we approach this difficult conversation today, I think we both need to acknowledge we've got different styles,
Hmm.
and we need to support each other with these different styles. It's okay to ask for permission to pause the verbal processor. Yet, Nicole, I sense if there's a significant political or power differential, it
Yeah, that's a
becomes
problem.
very difficult for somebody. Hey, 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 slow down, slow down. It's like, can I really say that to the chairman of the board? Can I really say that to the person who runs the audit committee? Can I really say that to my chief financial officer without thinking they're going to be consequences? Or can I just
Wouldn't it
fumble
be
my
wonderful if that's true?
But can I really fumble my way through the way I'm going? Look, the fumbling, and like in the West, we think that speed of response is a measure of our ability to cope. Yet the reality is, and this is why I talk about length of meetings, the reality is that it's the quality of our responses to the systemic or cultural issues we're trying to navigate. It's the quality of our thinking that will create sustained transformational change. And the important word there is sustained, not something that's going to go backwards the minute you step out of the system. So, to your scenario, Nicole,
Yeah.
I think it's very brave for somebody to say that. The
Yeah.
likelihood they will, if there's a power differential or perceived political difference as well, it's probably going to be pretty low. So, it's going to take a lot more courage to have a conversation before the meeting commences or slightly
Or
after the
circle
meeting,
back around, right? Yeah.
and just say, hey, next time we deal with something like that, I'm going to be more useful in the conversation if I've got more time, or if we can kind of agree how to prioritize the three questions you ask, to because I sense you're thinking out aloud. And they might say, yeah, I never thought about the fact I'm thinking out aloud. Thanks for pointing
That's right.
out, or some
That's right.
such thing.
That's right.
So listening is situational, it's relational, and it's contextual. It means you'll listen differently to your mother than you will to your manager. You'll listen differently to a boss than you will to a barber. You'll listen differently to a peer than you will to a customer. You'll listen differently to the head of quality than you will to somebody who's in marketing. It's just the reality of it. You'll listen differently to somebody more junior to you than somebody more senior from you as well. So the reality is we need to adjust all the way along. But back to Anne,
We love you,
what are you
Anne.
doing to create the container to have the conversation rather than
That's
being
right.
obsessed about making that conversation productive?
Yeah. All right. Level
Right.
5. Bring it home.
Level 5 is really simple. I have dyscalculus, which means I have a relationship with numbers. It means I transpose. If I say 9, 8, and 1, 9 or something like that, I'm more than likely to type or write 189 instead of 981 or something like that. So forgive me if I say things like 3 is half of 8, right?
You're forgiven.
So
Grace, grace,
Okay.
grace.
So, Nicole, when you hear me say 3 is half of 8, what's going through your mind?
I just found humor in it. That was it.
Anything else? If I
Well,
walked into a
it's
team
it's
meeting and,
incorrect. It's incorrect, but I know that you know it's incorrect. So
oh, tell me more. What's incorrect?
half of 8 is 4.
hmm
So I could be curious and say, I wonder why he thinks half of 8 is 3, right? And then I
Mm.
might get back to the place where I'd ask you a question and you would share with me, what did you call it? I have a what? You said, I have something. It was the first time I heard it. So
Dyscalculus.
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 Yeah, I've
Yeah.
never heard of that before. You're educating me.
Yeah, it's a form
Yeah.
of dyslexia that's around numbers.
I have never, ever heard of that. Thank you for teaching me today.
All
Dyscalculus.
right. Some people can see this and some people can only hear this. Nicole, when I say 3 is half of 8, I want you to close your eyes and draw the figure 8 in your eyes.
Oh, I see it. That's
Tell me
so
more.
good. That's so good. Two little threes. Boop.
Yet, if I was to say to you 0 is half of 8 now,
I see it.
mm,
No, that's wrong. Help
when
me, Oscar.
people say 3 is half of 8, we have these conversations in the workplace all the time. People come into a meeting and you go, oh, they're wrong. You know, based on your training, your history, your education, your life experience, it's like you've got all these filters on. It's like, what are they talking about? 3 is half of 8. And you are having 3 of half of 8 moments all the time in your workplace. Yet
Mm,
0 is also half of 8. Put
yes.
the two zeros on top of each other, you got an 8. So you got people in team meetings all the time saying 3 is half of 8 and 4 0 is half of 8, and you're there going, no. It's like, no, what do they mean? I was like, 4 is half of 8 on the Earth, on the Moon, on Mars, in the Milky Way. 4 is half of 8. They're wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong. You're
Yeah.
listening to what they say. Are you taking the time to fully comprehend and understand what it means for them? Because when you do, you won't waste time. Think about all the time you just wasted, Nicole, going, no, that is incorrect. It's about dyscalculia. And it was about none of those things. It
It's
was
about
about
perception.
your
Yeah.
assumptions that filter the way you listen to things. So when it comes to listening, the quickest way to help a verbal processor in the previous example, hey,
Yeah.
Nicole,
Tell me.
could you put that in a subject line in an email? If you could, what would it say? Hey, Nicole, if you could put that in one sentence, what would it be? And that helps them shorten it. And typically they get closer to what they mean. And when they do, they'll say code words. They'll say, well, actually, what I meant to say was, now that I think about it a little longer, what I meant to say was, and you'll hear all these code words if you're listening at that level.
Mm,
Sometimes it can be as simple as, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for your team? What does it mean for our organization? What does it mean for the budget? These are very simple shortcut questions. Again, questions with 8 words or less are going to get closer to meaning than word questions that are longer than that. Questions that are longer than that are typically biased questions, and I'm not saying biased questions are incorrect, but if you're trying to solve complex problems in human systems where 0, 4, and 3 are the possible answers, and all you do turn up to your gunfight with 4 in your pocket, but 0, 3, and 4 are all possible, and a combination of all 3 of those are also possible as well. If we're
yeah.
listening and communicating at that level, we can move cultures forward. We can create sustainable change that people want to lead themselves rather than relying on their leaders.
Mm. Another mic drop moment. Loved it. I'm gonna tell everybody or ask everybody that question. What is half of eight? This is fantastic. All right. I love your five levels of listening. I like your diagram on page 11, and I like your whole book. But we spent an hour getting to page 11. But I had a great time. Did you have a great time? I had a really good time. Oscar,
Well,
if
I
people want,
think that I think the big question we want to ask is, do we think the audience had a good time?
yeah, because you taught us a lot. And we talked about Anne, which always makes my heart happy. My listeners hear about Anne all the time. Yeah,
That's good. All
yeah,
right. Rather than getting in contact with me, get in
yeah.
contact with your own listening. Visit listeningquiz.com, take the 20 question assessment and the one, what do you struggle with when it comes to listening question, and connect with your own listening. You'll get a report, and that report will give you 3 practical tips based on where you're at about what to do about your listening in your next workplace interaction. And then if you want to get in touch with me, the report will have all the coordinates there. But visit listeningquiz.com, understand your own listening. And if you want to connect with me after that, that's okay too.
Okay, we'll put it all in the show notes down below, anyways. Okay, Oscar, it's early in the morning in Australia and it is 4:11 p.m. in North Carolina. And guess who's coming to see me, Oscar? My son from is coming from Montana, and so I got to go. I got to go cook dinner for my boy. And so I wish you were here. You could join us. Everybody, thanks for listening to the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast. It takes a second. Go click the like button and leave some love for Oscar and take the quiz. He's trying to hit a number, everybody. Thank you, Oscar. I'm grateful.
Thanks for listening.